Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Spouse Nation. We're excited to have you all here. Spouse Nation is our great resource of military spouse jobs, which the goal is to keep our military spouses employment ready until they're ready for employment. And one of the great tools that we have available on Spouse Nation is a coaching option. And so today, again, we are bringing some fabulous women here from the One-to-One Women Coaching Women nonprofit organization, which is over 15 years old. So we've got four fabulous women joining us today. We have, and I'm not sure if you can see everybody yet, but you will see them soon. We have Susan Hayward, and she is a certified life coach and a member of One-to-One. We have Carrie Fisher, who is a full-time caregiver, so go Carrie, for her husband, and she is a board member and volunteer for One-to-One. We have Katie Bolton, and she is a certified leadership and life coach, and also a board member and volunteer with One-to-One. And then joining us today for the first time is Kristen Lemke, and I understand she is the operations director, or otherwise known as the jack of all trades for One-to-One. So, great lineup. And I'm going to just say it because I'm so excited. I know they're going to get right into it. But the topic today for our Power Hour is called Beyond the Handshake. And Melinda and I just felt this was a great topic for us to be sharing with our military spouses as they are heading out there into the employment world and trying to figure everything out. So we are excited to have these ladies share this presentation. I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime, Melinda. She'll give us a little bit of housekeeping and then we will get started. And I don't even know if I said it today, but because it's a Wednesday, but my name is Stacey Harris and I am the Outreach Program Manager for Military Spouse Jobs. So Melinda, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I say afternoon because it happens to be the timeline at which we are recording this. My name is Melinda Rao, and I am the Senior Outreach Specialist for Military Spouse Jobs. I love what I do, and I love what we are able to offer our job seekers. Just a couple of housekeeping items for today's event. Today's event is pre-recorded. So if you are watching this event on one of our social media channels, it is not live. We cannot take questions live. We pre-recorded this so that you could watch this at your leisure. It will be available, and we will push this out through all of our avenues. I do encourage you to go to spousenation.org and check out our website, and you will find our One-to-One Women Coaching Women information on our mentor page on spousenation.org. There is an option there also to register. So if you do have any questions, go directly to the source. They are happy to answer your questions. They are happy to provide the additional information that you may be looking for. So that's all I have to offer. I'm going to turn this over and let our ladies get started. So thank you for watching today, and I'll see you at the end.
Okay, well, I am Susan Hayward, and I want to welcome all of you to Beyond the Handshake, which is a Power Hour webinar that was created and it's presented by One-to-One Women Coaching Women. I have been a part of this organization since 2005 when I completed my life coach training. And since then, I have provided pro bono coaching for nearly 40 women. I love coaching. I love what One-to-One does. And the different things that we offer women to do things differently and make changes in their lives through individual pro bono life coaching. And also we have programs for all genders to participate in some of our group coaching programs. I want to briefly introduce my three colleagues who will be participating in the webinar today. Carrie Fisher is a former client, a board member, a grant writer on the Special Projects Committee, and currently our board president. So welcome, Carrie. I want to introduce Katie Albert, who is a board member, the graphic designer extraordinaire. She's on the Special Programs Committee and current board treasurer. And as was mentioned before, I want to introduce Kristen Lemke, who was a former client and who is the operations director for One-to-One. And she is the go-to person for everything and for all questions. and she's the glue that holds us all together. So thank you for joining me today. One to One is a 501c3 nonprofit founded in 2004 by Susie Strauss, who is a professional life coach. And at that time, she decided she wanted to give away free coaching to women who could not afford a life coach. And 18 years later, we are stronger than ever as we continue to expand our coaching services, both for our clients and provide professional development opportunities for our coaches. We have 4 to 26 weeks of pro bono life coaching for eligible women who have stability of housing and basic life necessities, women who have been sober for a minimum of 1 year, and who are ready and willing to make changes in their current challenging circumstances. In 2014, we expanded our individual pro bono coaching to include women military caregivers, and that's when Carrie came into our fold. And military caregivers are living with challenging situations every single day of their life. In 2020, we responded to the challenges of COVID-19, and we now coach any woman emerging from a challenging situation, regardless of their ability to pay for coaching. And in 2022, we're wanting to include coaching services to the many women who have been part of the Legacy Caregiver Program, who are now being reassessed and possibly cut from the program as their lives will be facing many new challenges. All of our coaches are professionally trained, and they donate their time and skills and expertise to One to One. There is a nominal administrative fee for processing an application and matching clients and coaches. Our coaches provide safe and affirming coaching relationships where every individual can take their dreams and desires and turn them into practical, realistic, and actionable life plans. Our life coaching programs are transformative, they're far-reaching, rippling out from each woman to her family, to her community, to our nation, and even the world at large. We believe we are truly changing the world one woman at a time, and we hope that you become part of our outreach. I just want to take a moment and have us settle in before we get started on the actual Beyond the Handshake. And so I encourage you to be sure that you have something to write with and write on. And then I want to take a moment and help you get centered and come together. I want you to let go of all distractions. I want you to close your eyes and breathe deeply and slowly while I share a poem with you. And just accept this gift of our time together to focus only on yourself. This is The Journey by Mary Oliver. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. So please open your eyes and come back into this space. Our focus today is about making and keeping agreements. And as Mary Oliver says, the only life you can save is your own. And effective agreements will definitely help you save your life. Whenever someone comes to life coaching, they come for a particular reason. So we always start out acknowledging what that challenging circumstance is. And then we explore the impact of that current challenge in the context of all of areas of your life. It could be your health, your finances, your work, job, or career, your relationships with family members, friends, and colleagues, even your physical environment. We identify those parts of your life that are going well that you want to maintain. And then we identify any changes you want to make in your life, especially those changes that are due to the impact of your challenging circumstance. As you gain clarity about what you want to do differently, you create goals to support those changes. Going hand in hand with the goals you set are the agreements and promises you make with yourself and with others, family members, friends, and colleagues. It is important to give life to your agreements by writing them down or by saying them out loud to another person. When someone witnesses your agreement, either in writing or verbally, you are more likely to move into action and keep your word. Next, I want to look at a slide that has a quote on it. And this is what I learned from Dave Ellis when I attended his Falling Awake School of Life Coaching. We believe that your life at home and on the job works to the degree that you keep your agreements. And what he meant by that is that it's as if an agreement creates a lens through which you view your world differently. This lens brings into focus a vision of your future that causes you to make different choices in the present moment in order to align your behaviors with your intentions to reach those goals and create the life the way you want it to be. Remember, agreements are not made to make you do something you do not want to do. Rather, agreements are made to remind you of what you want to do more consistently. So making and keeping agreements actually is a skill that can easily be learned. Let's just take a quick look at the 6 steps for making and keeping agreements before we delve into the details of each step. So first, we have to identify what the agreement is. Then we have to decide on language. Then we have to write out the agreement. And I really encourage writing it out. That's a very important step. Then we figure out how we're going to track progress on the agreement. We also talk about managing any breakdowns in the agreement. And then cleaning up any mess that you've created by the breakdowns. So, gosh, this process sounds easy, right? Unfortunately, we often skip one or more of these steps, and our agreements are not kept. Agreements are all about credibility and trust. If you break your agreements, or you consistently ask people to renegotiate your agreements, or if you rescind them too often, you will damage your credibility and lose trust with others. The cost of breaking agreements is high in both your personal life and your professional life. However, the payoff for reliability and keeping your agreements and owning any breakdowns in your agreement is very high. So I just want to take a minute, and as we go through this process, each step a little more deeply, I want you to take a minute and think for yourself a current agreement that you have. And it could be an agreement you have with yourself or an agreement that you have with another person. And it can be about anything, but one that's important to you, an agreement that's important to you. So think about that agreement. Is it in your personal life? Is it in your social life? Is it in your professional life? Is it something that's working fairly well? Or maybe it's an agreement that's not working at all. What is that agreement? Jot it down so you have it in front of you and you can think about it as we go through each step. When we go through each step, I'm going to take a half a minute after each step and ask you to jot down any changes or rewrites you would be willing to make in your agreement to make it more effective and easier to keep in the future. So step number 1 is to identify the agreement. Let's examine the intentions of your agreement. Ask yourself, why are you making, or why did you make this agreement? Part of you might want to keep the agreement, and another part of you isn't really so sure. And acknowledging any ambivalence before you make an agreement is important. Your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors need to be in alignment to successfully keep your agreement. Is the agreement challenging yet realistic? If it's too challenging, it's not going to be easy to keep. If it's too easy, You might just forget about it. Does the agreement clearly articulate what is expected? If you are making an agreement that changes someone else's or your behavior, it is important that everyone making the agreement is clear about and in agreement with that change in behavior. For example, you might make an agreement with your spouse, a partner, or your children about taking turns cooking and cleaning up. I did this when my kids were teenagers. If you say, when I cook, you'll clean up, and when you cook, I'll clean up, that sounds like a solid agreement. However, what I discovered is each one of us had a different idea of what it meant to cook, and especially what it meant to clean up. And we didn't talk about that, so that was frustrating. If you want any support to help you keep your agreement, put that into place at the time of making the agreement. This is a part that we often forget to talk about. An example that comes to mind for me is the following. While away from home last summer, I asked my granddaughter to get my mail and water my plants every other day. And I have plants in my front yard and my backyard, and I have a little garden. So it was a pretty big job. And it was really hot, so it was important. And this was a really new responsibility for her. And she was really excited, but she was concerned about like forgetting to do it or forgetting to do it in time. And so we talked about what kind of reminder did she need that didn't sound like I was checking in on her every day or her mother was nagging her every day about it. And thanks to technology and grandchildren who understand it, she just realized she could set an alarm on her Alexa and be reminded to do that task for me every single day, and it worked perfectly. Sometimes we make agreements without even thinking about them, and later we wish we hadn't made the agreement. A friend might say, would you be willing to whatever? And you say, oh, of course, no problem. Well, you just made an agreement without thinking about it. Or sometimes we make agreements because no one else offers to do a task. And this happens to me a lot in the past at work. Something needs to be done, nobody steps up to the plate, and I go, okay, I'll do it. But I didn't really want to do it. So now I don't do that as often. Also, it's important to look for any self-sabotage, the ways you might consciously or unconsciously undermine your ability to keep your word. And that's why we look at the different areas of your life, because what you want to do in one area may be in direct conflict with the other area. And if you don't recognize that, then it's going to be hard to keep the agreement. Also, this is a time to look at where are you overcommitting. When we make too many agreements with too many people, it becomes overwhelming and can lead to breakdowns in many of your agreements. So just take a moment and think about the agreement that you have in front of you. And is there something that I talked about in this first step that you want to make a note to do differently in the future with that particular agreement? Okay, I want to take a moment and have Carrie share an agreement that she has with her children and their families. And I know it's been an agreement for a while, and it's sort of worked and sort of not worked. And just kind of want you to share that with us and tell us where you are.
Sure. Well, we moved to Florida from Wisconsin about 2 years ago. And part of our agreement amongst our family when we moved was that our adult kids and their kids and us would all get together virtually at least once a week, just so that we could gather like we used to when we were at home. And in reality, it's been really hit or miss. And I find us making excuses for that, like, oh, one of them's too busy, or COVID, or just all kinds of reasons that we've come up with that we don't quite all get together as much as we thought we would. Individually, we do, and occasionally impromptu, but nothing scheduled. And we've continued to try to schedule something, but it's not like everybody shows up when they would. So I feel like we're still not doing a really good job with this agreement because it's really hit or miss.
Mm-hmm. So just a question, and I think you may have already done this, but have you had a discussion, whether it's everybody together or individually with the different families, about why this is really important for you and Eric to have the whole family come together. Because often, especially when we're making agreements with people that we know, we assume that they know us well enough to understand why we want it. And sometimes they don't really know what's that important. So have you had that discussion?
I think I feel like we've had that discussion individually, but because we haven't met as a large group, or when we did meet as a whole family, it's been because of something. And then that topic takes away of really talking about what day are we going to do this, or how will we schedule this. So that's definitely one thing that I'll write down as a step we need to take, is to get the day, the time, and get that communicated.
Mhm. So once you get the date, the frequency, and the time articulated, also maybe being really clear about what's the length that everybody wants to commit to. Because if they think it's going to go on too long, they may think they don't have enough time. So maybe starting out with shorter times of getting together and then lengthening them as they evolve into a time when everybody wants to be together longer.
I think that's a great idea. We've also talked about allowing people to leave early. Like, don't feel like if we're going to say 2 to 3 on Sunday that you have to be there that whole time, but maybe check in during that time with us whenever we have that virtual meet set up. And we're going to try and experiment with that this week, and I'll have to let you know how that goes. But I think that's a skill that I've been practicing in teams with a kind of a part-time job I have going too. It's been really effective to just set up that time frame and give permission to pop in during that time when it's like a brainstorming session. So I think working on that with my family is also going to extend into that workplace too.
Okay. And then just one last question is it clear before you come together if there's a topic, or is there a game you want to play, or do you want to sing songs together, or do you want to have a particular topic that you're discussing? So it's not just like you family gets together because something happened that you need to talk about.
I really like that idea. We haven't gotten to the point of setting up topics, but when one of us does come up with something just impromptu, that's usually when we are most successful.
Yeah.
So whether it's talking about some recipe that grandma had and everybody needs to know what the right ingredients are, or if we're playing, there's a virtual bingo that we've played online that's been really fun. But if it's something like that, that's just impromptu, it's worked. And maybe setting that more intentional so that there's a reason for it would be something to look at. So I wrote that down as one of the ideas going forward.
Okay, great. So
Thanks.
thanks, Carrie, for sharing that agreement that's really important to you and your husband and to your entire family. So let's take a look at step number 2, which is about deciding on the language of the agreement. In coaching, we learned that word choice is important, and each of these words, agree, promise, or commit, have a unique meaning to each one of us. Choose the word that carries the strongest commitment for you. So for myself, I use all 3 words in different situations. I use the word agree when I'm in my job environment, like I agree to do this, I agree to do that. If it's with my family and close friends, I usually use the word promise. I promise to do this, I promise to do that. And when I'm making an agreement with myself that's not necessarily spoken out loud to someone else, I often use the word commit. I'm making a commitment to myself. And for me, each one of those has a meaning that is specific for the arena that I'm making the agreement in. But you may choose to use the same word for all your agreements. When making an agreement that involves others, it's important to specify observable results so that you eliminate different interpretations between you and others who are counting on you to keep your word, and vice versa. Including who, what, and when in the wording of the agreement is important. Vagueness that leads to various interpretations is the reason why many agreements break down. Intentionally worded agreements with specific timelines are especially important when one person depends on another person to complete their part of the agreement in order to then do their own part. And I know this comes up a lot in the work environment. Another thing that's really important is to discuss the consequences of not keeping the agreement at the time the agreement is made. Don't wait for it to break down and then say what the consequences are. Take a moment, think about what I just said, and maybe Carrie, do you want to put up that slide that has that information? I think it's slide 8. And think about what you might do differently in your agreement moving forward. What words are you going to choose? Okay, let's move on to another sharing, and this is a sharing by Kristen, and she has an agreement with her son Eric regarding bedtime routines, and I'd just like you to share with us, how is that working for you, for your husband, and for Eric?
Well, Eric is 10, and we've made an agreement that he'll start following a routine each evening to kind of help him make sure that he's getting everything done that he needs to get done and that he's in bed by 9:30. And he's fought this for months. I mean, this is when I think back, this is something he's a fighter. He wants to fight against all routine. And he does better with routines, and he's always had one. He just doesn't realize that he does. And he does so much better with them. And we talked about it though, and he got mad and he said, no, I don't like routines. He doesn't like that word. But I wanted to get buy-in from him. And I also wanted the evening to be less about him getting mad and, all of us just getting amped up at that time of night when we should be calming down. And I wanted to take the disagreements and arguments out of that. He is only allowed to have an hour of video games a day. So he really wants that hour. So we're trying to figure out a way to kind of incorporate that as well into part of that agreement that we've made with him.
Okay, so it sounds like you've been working at this a little bit, and you talked about consequences or trying to figure out a consequence and having that revolve around his screen time, video time. And I think what I found is with children, often, and even with adults, often the consequence maybe carries a negative tone to it. And with children, that is really difficult. It makes them fight against it. So I'm wondering if there's a way to tie the consequence to something positive, almost like a reward. So can you think of some way to use the video game time and have that be a consequence, but have it be something positive? Does anything come to mind?
We've talked about my husband and I, he will sometimes want one of us to play games with him, and it's just not something that obviously I really want to do. My husband used to play, so we thought, there's an opportunity for some quality time there, and he would really love that if we would participate in his hour of gaming. We've talked about earning options toward like family game night, or a movie that we could all get together and watch, moving towards something like that, if you can get that all done every night during the week, then you can work towards whatever.
Yeah, I like that idea of earning something, and maybe it could be, you'd have to decide, as the three of you decide, if he follows the routine 3 nights in a row out of the week, he gets to have one of you for a certain amount of time of video gaming together. Or maybe if he does it all 5 nights of the week, he earns an extra X amount of time on the weekend for his gaming. That's a possibility. And I remember when you and I talked about it earlier, in the beginning, he wanted to go to bed at 10 and you guys said 9:30 and you kind of stuck to 9:30. So I wonder if over time, because sometimes agreements, especially with children, and they take on more responsibility, you can grow the agreement. And so maybe if he does it so many nights in a row, he earns extra minutes that moves his bedtime back to eventually being 10 p.m., if that works for you.
Yeah, I like that idea too, and he would really love that, of course. I think the whole idea of the 9:30 was just that, probably by that time of night, I'm ready to like be done parenting for the night. But I mean, yeah, I think 10 o'clock is reasonable as long as, we're working on, the reminders of getting enough sleep and all of those kind of things. But 10 o'clock is reasonable too.
Yeah. And then just one other thing that you had mentioned is he sort of pushes away at the word routine. I don't want anything, he doesn't like routines. And I wonder if he could come up with a different language around that. And not that you want to give him the words, but maybe you can talk with him and see if something comes up like bedtime responsibilities or bedtime habits or some other word that's meaningful to him, but then he wouldn't feel like it's a routine that makes it rigid. So that's just another possibility.
I like that as well. Like I said, he's very allergic to why I don't know, but allergic to that word routine. But I like the idea of, here are your tasks or here are your responsibilities. Responsibilities might get him to buy in a little bit more.
And then do you have this agreement written down?
We are in process on that. That was another thing that when we have written things out before, that bothers him too. He's just like pushing back against all of this, but I'm in process of doing that right now. And then I want to sit down with him and make sure that we can go through that together, and we can tweak it with his input as well.
Yeah, and I would suggest making it really simple, like 9 p.m. take your medicine, 9:15 brush your teeth, 9:30 be in your room, and then actually you sign it and he signs it, and that is his way of knowing that he agreed to it and bought into it, because he actually signed his name. And I found that works a lot with kids to help them feel a little more committed to following through. Okay, thanks, Kristen. Let's take a look at the third step, which is writing the agreement down. The act of writing down your agreement exponentially increases your success in keeping your agreement. Agreements with deadlines, especially when one person must complete their part before you can do your part, is really important that that's written down and agreed upon. When you write down the agreement, it lets the other person know how serious you are about keeping the agreement. Having a written agreement helps you avoid the sort of out of sight, out of mind breakdown, especially if the agreement involves changing an ingrained pattern of behavior. Like if you're really trying to change something, if you just don't have to think about it, then you don't practice that change. And the whole idea is to practice doing something consistently in a different way that you want to do. So just take a moment and look at the agreement that you were thinking about and see if there is something about the way you wrote it or didn't write it that you want to do differently moving forward with that agreement. So I want to move on and talk a moment about tracking your agreement. If you don't track your progress in keeping your agreement, you may forget about it altogether. Is your agreement time limited? Does it have a beginning and an end? Those are the easiest ones to start with, shorter agreements that have a beginning and an end. Is your agreement something that's ongoing day after day, week after week, or month after month? No matter what the time limit is for your agreement, it's important to track your progress. Begin by deciding exactly how you're going to track the progress and how often. Does it make sense to check in on your progress? I encourage you, especially when you're first doing an agreement, to only track successes. Don't track, because it's sort of like changing habits. You know you're going to change it, you agree to change it, and then all of a sudden you're back in the old habit again. And so you want to track all the times you do it in the new way or what the agreement is. And the only time you start tracking times you don't follow through is when it becomes really consistent that you're consistently not following through. And then that leads to a breakdown, which we're going to talk about managing breakdowns in a minute. And so I want you to think about your agreement that you have. Do you have a way to track it? Have you thought of a way to track it? Do you need someone else to help you track it? Just take a moment and jot down your thoughts on that. So let's take a look at managing breakdowns. That's the part none of us want to talk about, right? Managing breakdowns. But that's the really most important thing to talk about when making an agreement. When you're able to make and keep your agreements, you can navigate through life with more grace and ease. However, when you are not keeping your agreement with yourself or with others, you can become weighed down with self-blame, embarrassment, guilt, or even shame. When you track your agreement and you notice that you or the other person are not doing what you agreed to do, you have 3 options to manage that breakdown. First, report it as soon as possible. Have that discussion with the other person or with yourself if it's just an agreement with yourself. Take some time to talk about it or talk it over with a friend. Why am I not doing my part? What happened? And then either renegotiate. Maybe the agreement was too strict. Maybe you need to renegotiate either the agreement itself or the timeline for the agreement. And then you can just get back on track with the agreement slightly tweaked. Or maybe you really wanted to do this agreement, and what you found out is you just thought you wanted to do it. You really don't want to do it. So you just want to say, you know what? I figured out this doesn't work for me. I don't want to do this agreement. And so you have that conversation with the other person, and you may make a new agreement, or you may just say, that's just something that's not going to work. And then you go on and do other things. Be gentle with yourself. Know that everybody breaks an agreement sometime, sometimes more often than not. And try to look at the broken agreements as feedback, not as failure. Feedback so you can identify the reasons for the breakdown and then use that information to improve your agreement making and keeping in the future. Okay, so it's a learning process. Don't keep score and build up resentment over broken agreements with another person. If there are people in your life, though, who consistently break their agreements with you, in addition to releasing that resentment, protect yourself from repeated exposures to their lack of follow-through by maybe not making so many agreements with them in the future, because you just kind of know it's not going to work. So don't even enter into it. So take a moment and look at the agreement that you have. Think about if you've had any breakdowns. What do you want to do about that? Do you want to renegotiate, or do you want to rescind the agreement altogether? I would like Carrie to share an agreement, a social agreement, that I feel she handled very effectively. She and the other people involved. It wasn't just her. So Carrie, tell us about that.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. My husband and I are really good friends with another couple who lives near us, and they're also former military, and the husband has a caregiver, basically. So both he and my husband kind of forget things sometimes, and every now and then they would make plans for us to get together as couples and sort of forget to check back with the wives who had the schedules and took care of things for them and knew whether or not that agreement could be kept or not, for sure. And sometimes it created some stress if there'd be like last minute cancellations if I was really sure that the other couple had talked this out and that this was a set thing that we planned around, and we'd have to cancel at the last minute, or they'd have to cancel at the last minute. So we got together, the 4 of us, and we made an agreement that any plans would go through the wives first before it was committed. So for us, that kind of meant that the 2 wives would verify anything our husbands came up with instead of just taking that. And no matter how much they were sure that that's how it was going to be. And it's really made a big difference in how often we can get together and really our interaction once we do get together. It's just so much less stressful. It's something we all know is there. And we've been really good about keeping that agreement. But it was kind of going through really all the steps that were on there, including the managing the agreements and kind of going through a mess that we've encountered through that, and really came to a way that we could honor that agreement. We all wanted it, and to just work together and help us enjoy our time.
Thank you so much. That's an excellent example of renegotiation of a breakdown in an agreement and creating an agreement that works really well. So fabulous. I want to talk a minute about, I guess I want to label it unspoken agreements. Sometimes there are agreements that I might have in my head when I'm working with someone else on something, but we never really made a formal agreement. So there's a breakdown in the collaboration. There's a breakdown in the way we're working together. And so when that happens, when I recognize over and over, like, oh, I'm getting really frustrated about this or about that in working with this colleague, I realize that I have an unspoken agreement in my mind. And of course, they don't know it because I haven't spoken the agreement and we haven't made that agreement. So, Katie, you were going to share a little bit about a colleague that you have who does not respond in a timely manner for extended periods of time, and then sometimes is there 24/7 and never really seems to be aware that they were missing. So what do you want to do about that?
Well, thank you, Susan. As we were going through all the steps that I've, seen before, used before, it suddenly something new kind of came to me. So technically, he's a colleague. We work together, we collaborate, and we collaborate really well when he, as you said, when he's there and he sort of disregards the absences. But he also is my boss, so that's there was a layer there of me not quite knowing how to confront the situation, and obviously not wanting to be confrontational, but and be respectful of his position. He's the founder of the organization, and I'm contracted to work with them. So what came to me, but he's funny and he's easygoing when I do actually get in touch with him. So what came to me, I was looking at the report, rescind or renegotiate slide and thinking, well, I have tried reporting it, and tried to, and in terms of saying, hey, we haven't talked for so long, can we get on the phone? I don't want to rescind because I really enjoy the organization. I really believe in the work. I want to stay involved. I really want to continue to work with him. So I think the magic will be in the renegotiation. And I think what came to me is actually asking him what would work in terms of a regular meeting schedule and do a little like humor around it. It's very clear how much he always admits that he's disappeared. He doesn't really apologize, but he offers a lot of explanations, excuses. So I think that the secret will be to say where and when can we commit to knowing you best, and knowing that what can we commit to have a regular meeting schedule, if it's even once a month, face to face, even if it's on Zoom, but something where he's not in the car, he's not multitasking, and just ask him what works for him. And then just say, and to really, as you sort of said, even I think with Carrie's first example, explain, or I think it was actually maybe Kristen, I can't remember, clarifying why it's important to me and why it's important to the outcomes we want, and not to play the blame game or guilt him for what has happened in the past, but really just start fresh and kind of have a recommitment ceremony in terms of how we're going to engage going forward.
No, that's great. I really like the way you're thinking of, actually, it's creating a first agreement with him, because it was in your brain, but not in his brain. And also, I just want to mention, as I told Kristen to get her son to sign the agreement, this is a case where you don't sign the agreement with your boss, but by stating it and then reflecting back, okay, so what I understand is we're going to meet da 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 da, and you sort of go through the parameters of it, and then he says, yes, that's it. That's kind of your verbal signing of the agreement with him.
Yeah. And I think we didn't do it formally in the beginning because we actually were already meeting so often. It sort of seemed like it went without saying. I never saw this part of the timeline. I didn't predict it to it. So yeah, I think you're right. It is sort of doing it for the first time because we never did. And then it all started right before COVID too. So we could see each other more easily. And then the challenges of the COVID hustle.
Yeah. Great. Okay, thank you. That was great. And that leads us into the next step, the final step that we often don't like to step into, and that is cleaning up any messes we create by breaking our agreements. And remember, and you had just mentioned that he always had reasons why or excuses. A good excuse does not erase the fact that an agreement was broken. The agreement is a fact, it's broken. You can have all the reasons, it could be very legitimate, but the agreement was still broken. And it may have caused some kind of difficulty or mess for the other person. So it's really important that you ask them, can I clean up any messes I made? So first you say, I'm really sorry, I didn't get such and such done on time. I know it may have caused you some issues. Are there any messes that I need to clean up? And I think a lot of times this is true in work situations where what you're doing or what they're doing, they need you to get something done so they can do their part. And then maybe there's someone else down the line. So it might be that, okay, because you didn't get this to me, I can't get it to this person. Could you please just let them know what happened? That could be cleaning up that mess. Once you've decided how you're going to move forward from the broken agreement, check in with the other person to see if there's anything else. Because sometimes in the beginning, they're just like, oh, no, that's okay, no problem. But then if you go back and check with them one more time, maybe there is something that they thought of. And I know they really appreciate that. If someone broke an agreement with you and they do not apologize, which I guess had happened to you, Katie, it's important to let them know without any judgment or blame about any mess that was created and how they can help you clean it up. And I say that help you. It's not like you're dumping this cleanup on them. You're in it together. And this will reinforce why you were counting on them to keep their word and the consequences of their breaking the agreement. So look at the agreement that you have in front of you and think about, are there any messes that might need to be cleaned up if you or the other person doesn't follow through on the agreement? And what might those be and how might you clean those up? So just take a second and do that. So at the end here, I just want to throw out another, it's not one of the steps, but it's just something that came up for me when I was talking with Kristen about agreements that she has with her children. And I know she's been working on different agreements for the last few years. And I want to share a strategy that I think might work really well with children, and that's making some agreements in stages. So Kristen, I know that you're anticipating sometime really soon now making an agreement with your son Cameron because he's going to be having his driving permit, his license, I guess, actually. And once he has the license, the whole landscape of your life changes. So what are some of the questions you have about making this agreement with Cameron?
I guess because he's a teenager, it's going to be about how he's going to respond to it, how we can help him understand why this is important.
Mm-hmm.
We want him to learn responsibility. It's going to be things like, paying for gas and the car maintenance and, driving boundaries. There's so many things. And we don't want to have to encounter those things as they are happening. We want to have a plan laid out when the day he gets that license.
Mm-hmm. So it almost feels like, I know I jotted down for myself just a number of questions like, what car will he be driving? Like you said, who pays for the gas? Do you pay for some of it and he pays for some of it? depending on where he's allowed to drive and where is he driving to and from school, to and from football practice. Is he driving to and from his friends' houses? Maybe in the beginning he has more limited driving area that he can go from your home, and then later maybe he'll be getting a job, and who's going to pay for the gas with that? Well, now he's getting a salary, so maybe he can pay more gas, so that it can change as the situation changes. And I think also talking about ahead of time who's going to be riding with him and why. And I just, when you and I were talking, I didn't realize how different the states were about the limitations of once you get your license, who can ride with you and how old they have to be, and all of that kind of stuff. And I happen to live someplace where it's really strict, and I didn't realize it. I thought it was that way every place. Also, you might want to talk about getting an app, something like 360, for safety reasons, not because, oh, I'm checking up to see where you're going, but agree on how are you going to know that he gets where he says he's going, and you can feel safe and not worry about him. Talking about curfew at some point, maybe not in the beginning, having a set curfew as part of the agreement, but putting all these things on the table at the beginning, like these are all the things we need to figure out. And for the next 3 months or 6 months, whatever feels good for you, here's what the agreement is going to be. And here's all these other things that will be added into the agreement as your situation changes and you have shown responsibility and you get a job, or, all the things that change. So I just think creating an expanding agreement over time might be the way to go with something like that. And I think that might work for other people in different situations too. Like sometimes we try to take the whole thing and make this agreement, and it's so big that it's overwhelming. So if you can do it in steps and stages, then the agreements in the end add up being a bigger agreement, but you do them along the way and there's success, and success builds more success, right?
Yes.
So that would just be something that I would offer to you. And as you're working on it, if you ever want to give me a call, I'm available. You know my phone number. So
And I will gladly do that.
So I just want to summarize a couple things for everyone. Remember that making and keeping agreements is a process that anyone can learn, but there are 6 steps and you need to do all 6 steps. When there's a breakdown in an agreement, first thing you do is report it, even if it's hard because you're the one who broke the agreement. Then quickly review the first 4 steps to try to figure out, well, where did I go wrong? What can I do differently if I renegotiate this agreement? And be brave enough that if it's really not going to be something you want to do, to rescind that agreement with that other person. Apologize and clean up any messes that you made with the breakdown. And I encourage everyone to continue making agreements. The only way to get better at making and keeping agreements is to keep doing it, to keep practicing it. And I can promise you it will make a huge difference in your life if you practice making and keeping effective agreements. And I want to thank everyone for being with us today. I think we have a couple minutes left. If there's any question from those who are present, I'd be glad to take them, or comments.
Susan, I was just going to comment that I have tried using these steps on agreements that I make with myself. If I have goals that I want to make, like whether it's writing goals or activities that I just want to get done in my personal or professional life, if I write these steps down for my own personal self, I'm much more likely to keep that agreement. So I know we talk broadly in terms of agreements with others, but I've been really impressed with how much that keeps me on track to really follow through those steps. And cleaning up your mess is like a big part of that when you mess up with yourself on an agreement. It doesn't have to be some huge, horrible mess, but even, you missed a deadline. Give yourself grace. Keep yourself accountable the next time. But I highly encourage people to try it on yourself first if you're reluctant to try it in an agreement with others. It's very helpful.
That's great. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, I did want to mention, because we are going to be presenting this to job seekers primarily, and I'm trying to think of how we can reframe these so that job seekers will identify more with this process. Is it easily applicable to the job seeking process?
My first answer is yes. A question I never thought about. So let's just see what comes out of my head. I think first there would be an agreement with yourself. What kind of job am I looking for? What are the parameters for my job? How often? How many hours? What salary? All the different questions, and make an agreement and get really clear before you start looking for that job what you're really looking for, because it's easy to just take the first thing or to take the thing that offers more money, but maybe that's not the job you really want. So being really clear about what are the financial requirements and what are the personal requirements. I can say that I have loved every job I've had my entire life. I was a teacher, I was an organic vegetable farmer, I was director of shelters for homeless people. I'm a coach. I'm a grandmother. Every job I have, I've loved, and I haven't made a lot of money, but it doesn't matter. I've had enough, you know, and so everybody has to weigh those things. So kind of agreeing with yourself. What's the purpose of getting the job? What are you looking for? All those little details is the beginning, and then maybe making an agreement with yourself about when I go to interview, what are the questions that I need to ask so that I have the information to make a good decision about this job? Because we all know you go and you talk to someone and they're really nice and it's easy talking to them and they're social and it's great and you love it and think, oh, this would be a great place to work. But what are the questions you need to ask to find out if that environment is what you really want to walk into?
Right.
So those are a few things I can think of.
I have to say, when Katie was talking about setting up that time and then that person was your boss, that to me is a very important, I mean, this is where this would all come in handy, because how many of us has that happened to, really? And you're just trying to think, how do I handle this? And so I think these would be good tools to do that, of, hey, what time does work best for you? I want to make sure that I'm approaching this, that, we can, when is it convenient for you and all that? Because I think many times people just let that go. We just let that go, but then it's not productive.
Right.
So I liked it when she said, and my boss. I'm like, yeah, how many of us I've been in that situation. So that was a good point of, because I look at this too, it's almost like it's not that we're sticking up for ourselves, or maybe we are, but that contract kind of empowers us to emboldens us to move forward. So that was very interesting.
Yeah, it's like you're advocating for yourself, and in order to advocate for yourself, you have to be really clear what you want. So you agree with yourself ahead of time, here's what I want in a job or in a career change. Or also, there may be a job you apply for, but there's something that you don't have one of the requirements. Then you either make an agreement with yourself to fulfill that requirement and go back and apply again to that job, or you do that, maybe that job's gone, but you've prepared yourself for something in the future.
Right.
So I could see it working that way also.
Right.
Susan, I have two thoughts I wanted to, if I may, chime in about with this. Melinda, one of the question you had about framing it for job seekers, another layer of that came to my mind, because I coach a lot of people through career change and transition, and within an organization. The commitment that you might make, the agreement is also, to Carrie's point about to yourself, can be about the process of doing that job search, because I think a lot of people can just feel like, oh, I'm supposed to do it all day, every day, day after day. And ultimately that's high burnout, low success. It kind of gets you into scarcity mentality. And I think the real secret to keep Susan's, like to what Susan was speaking about, the commitment to what really will serve you, make you happy, energize you. We can get caught up in that scarcity mode. So really it's just saying what's reasonable for me, and maybe doing that bite-sized thing too, just doing it a little bit at a time, not expecting, it doesn't have to be a full-time job. And that probably, wouldn't put you in your best self. So that's just a thought that I have about that.
Well, one of the things that we highly encourage, especially those of our job seekers who are in a location or in a situation where having full-time employment is just not realistic, one of the things that we highly encourage our job seekers to do is to get in this mindset of doing just one thing every week or every day.
Yep.
That moves them towards that goal. So it does kind of break it into those bite-sized pieces. We're just saying it a little differently. So when we share this, that's kind of how I'm going to promote this is this is a step-by-step process to meeting those agreements that you're making with yourself to maintain your employment readiness so that you will be prepared, so that you know what direction you want to go into and you are moving towards those things that you are prepared for. So I think that's how we can apply this to job seekers. So not just personally, we won't be just applying this personally, but we'll be applying it to the employment search as well. So I appreciate, I took lots of notes.
And I was going to say one really important thing is that part about thinking of the breakdowns and recognizing them. So if you made an agreement with yourself that you were going to call 3 different places to look for a job every week, and by the 3rd week you're going crazy, then you just need to renegotiate with yourself, realize that's not working. What would work for me? I'm still going to look for a job, but maybe, like you said earlier, once a week I'm going to look for a different job until I find one. So I think the steps apply, but just in a different way.
Does anybody else have anything to share?
This is just a little sidebar comment to Kristen. Good luck with the driver. The new driver. It actually can
thank you.
It can come in extremely handy.
Yeah.
And I this is my tip to all parents, and a lot of people freak out about it. I got all of my kids their very first credit card when they got their driver's license with their name on it. And all purchases had to be authorized by me or they would lose it. But man, did that come in handy, because if I need to go to the vet with the animal or go to the grocery store to go gas up my car.
I never thought of that. That's an excellent tip. Thank you. I love that.
Somewhere, there was never an issue that they can't put gas in their car or can't get help. But it's funny, my kids were very good about, if something happened, they always called for pre-authorization. So we had that contract, I guess. So that does all match. I had that contract with my children. This is what we're going to do. These are the rules. They only broke it a few times because they felt lunch over Christmas was an emergency, and I let that go. But it kind of teaches them that responsibility, but it's a great way to build that trust with that new young driver is, hey, this is a contract between us here. But also when they can run to the store, new drivers love to go run errands. Yes. So that's a good thing.
Awesome.
That's what I'm looking forward to the most.
So if there are no other comments, I think I'm going to turn it over to Stacy and have her close us out.
Well, thank you, Melinda. Another great Power Hour. First of all, I love the title, Power Hour. It's fabulous. And we enjoy having you ladies as partners with us here at Spouse Nation. And we've got another great Power Hour that will be coming up soon. I'm not even going to reveal the name of it. We are going to surprise you with it. But so watch for some coming soon information on that. And as Melinda said earlier, please check us out on spousenation.org. There's a lot of great resources there. All things to help keep you engaged, keep you employment ready, maybe just learning some new tips and tricks, and or just being part of this great, wonderful Spouse Nation, because we're all in it together. So thank you so much for joining us today. And then till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I just want to remind all of those that are watching that this was pre-recorded. So if you do have questions, there are 2 ways that we can get those questions directly to these ladies that have shared this information with us. You can do it through our Facebook page. We have 2 pages, a private group that you have to request to join, and then our public page. Please share your question, and we can actually email these questions directly to these ladies. The other way you can do that is go on to spousenation.org, find the one-to-one registration tab under mentor, and you can directly work with them and start that relationship and ask those questions. So thank you again for this amazing power hour. Once again, you guys have filled my notebook with notes. And I really appreciate all of the time and the care. I genuinely feel your passion for this process and this effort of supporting our women and our caregivers. So thank you very much for that time. So with that, I'm going to end this session, and thank you. And we hope to see you again at our next Power Hour.